Okay, I'm going to go through all the major arteries starting from the heart all the way to the end or the start of the brachial artery or the end of the axillary artery. So here I've made a list showing the branches that come off of each. So starting with the aortic arch, so we're going to start right here. And so off the aortic arch, you have three major arteries. You have your left subclavian, your left common carotid, and your brachiocephalic artery, which will branch into your right common carotid and your right subclavian. And now off of your right subclavian and your left subclavian, you will have a number of branches which have their own sub-branches on them. And a way to remember the main branches is to think of vitamin C and D, hotel, spa. So VITCD, HTL, SPA. So vitamin C and D, we're going to start with vertebral artery. That's going to be the first branch off the subclavian. Then comes the internal thoracic. T stands for the thyrocervical trunk, off of which will come your suprascapular artery and your transverse cervical artery. Off your transverse cervical artery, sometimes you may find your dorsal scapular. Otherwise, it'll be found later on. The C is the costocervical trunk, not artery. It's going to be the trunk. And D is going to be dorsal scapular artery. So we got vertebral, internal thoracic, thyrocervical, costocervical, dorsal scapular. Then hotel, HTL, you'll have H is actually the superior thoracic, but superior at one time was called the highest. So the highest thoracic today is called the superior thoracic, but if you can remember that, it'll be H for hotel. T, again, this one's going to be thoracoacromial trunk, which will have its four branches, the deltoid, acromial, clavicular, and pectoral branches. L from hotel is going to be the lateral thoracic. And then for spa, you'll have your subscapular, which will branch into the circumflex scapular artery and the thoracodorsal artery. P is for your posterior circumflex humeral artery. A is for your anterior circumflex humeral artery. So I know that was a lot to absorb right there, so I sort of went ahead and drew it in a picture. Tried color coding them as best as I could. So starting from your heart, very simplified heart, you have your aortic arch. Off of it, you'll have your left subclavian, your left common carotid artery, and this orange part here, this little trunk here, is going to be your brachiocephalic artery. That will continue upward into your right common carotid and then break off into your right subclavian, which I color-coded will just sort of end right here. So this little red region here, it is continuous with the axillary artery, which is also continuous with the brachial artery. Alright, so as I said, we're going to think of vitamin C and D. So vitamin V is your vertebral artery, that's the first one. I is your internal thoracic, and if you remember, this one will go down sort of the sides of the sternum and down the the anterior thoracic wall. Then T from vitamin is going to be the, let's see if I can remember it, thyrocervical trunk. And off the thyrocervical trunk, you will have your suprascapular artery and your transverse cervical artery. So VIT, vitamin C and D. So C is going to stand for the costocervical trunk or artery. And that's not one that we see here, but it actually comes off the, at least from the pictures that I've seen, it comes off the posterior side of the subclavian, and it goes up and out. And then D is your dorsal scapular. So we're going to start again. Vertebral, internal thoracic, thyrocervical trunk, costocervical, dorsal scapular. Now I put this right here as well, and then made the same color on purpose because depending on which cadavers you're looking at, which humans you have, the dorsal scapular does not always come off of the subclavian. It sometimes comes off the thyrocervical artery. Not the thyrocervical, transverse cervical, pardon me. Transverse cervical artery will sometimes branch the dorsal scapular. So it'll be in one or the other in most people. Alright, so that's the end of the subclavian, and that's when we enter the axillary artery region. And now we are going to use the phrase hotel spa. Hotel, so H is going to be, well, we call it the superior thoracic, but if you think of superior being renamed as highest, as it once was back in ancient times, so the highest thoracic, or the superior thoracic artery. And then next from hotel is going to be HT. So this is going to be the thoracoacromial trunk. Thoracoacromial trunk. And this one will have 4 branches. The first one will be going to the deltoid, which is over here. Deltoid branch. Next one is the acromial branch, which will attach to the acromion, or will not attach to, but it'll go toward the acromion. Then we have the clavicular branch, and then we have the pectoral branch. So here we go again. We got the superior thoracic, thoracoacromial trunk with its 4 branches. So HTL. That is the lateral thoracic. HTL, hotel. Spa is going to start with the S, and that is the subscapular artery. The subscapular artery will branch into 2. One will will circumflex to the back of the scapula, and so that's called the circumflex scapular artery. And if you recall, that goes to the triangular space as far as the spaces between the muscles. And then the one that continues downward is going to be the thoracodorsal artery. So subscapular artery branches into the circumflex scapular artery and the thoracodorsal artery. Alright, so we got HTL, SPA, S, P, or actually it's PA. These can be switched. This shows a little bit of 3D in a 2D drawing. So we have SPA. P stands for posterior circumflex humeral artery, and the A is anterior circumflex humeral artery. So they actually are one continuous artery, but one goes behind, so we call that posterior. One goes in front, so we call that the anterior circumflex humeral artery. And there you have it. After that, you enter the brachial artery region and its branches and whatnot. So we're not going to cover that right now, but hopefully that helps. I went ahead and labeled everything. So real fast: aortic arch, left subclavian, left common carotid, brachiocephalic artery, right common carotid, right subclavian, vertebral artery, internal thoracic artery, thyrocervical trunk. This is the suprascapular artery. This here is the transverse cervical artery. We have the costocervical trunk right here. We have our dorsal scapular, and it could be here or it could be here, one or the other. And then we move into our axillary artery. The first one off, it's going to be the superior thoracic. If you remember, you can think of it as highest if you want to use the hotel wording. So you got superior thoracic. Then you have your thoracoacromial trunk with its 4 branches: deltoid, acromial, clavicular, and pectoral branches. Next is the lateral thoracic, your subscapular artery, which branches to the circumflex scapular and the thoracodorsal artery. Next, you have your anterior and posterior circumflex humeral arteries, before you go into the brachial artery. Alright, so I hope that helps, and that's it for now.